it is these relationships that we have to keep connected and keep communicating to try to find ways to support one another, because this will not be forever. And I think us sharing strategies and what has worked and what hasn't will maybe help us find our way through with the least amount of damage as possible.
Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Last week, municipal leaders from across Canada traveled to Washington, D.C. to take part in a tri-lateral conference with mayors and municipal leaders from the United States and Mexico. What was the Canadian mission, though? Quite simple. Strengthen relationships and push back against the ongoing trade escalations from the United States of America. Now, among the Canadian delegation was Sturgeon County Mayor Alanna Hnatiw, who took the opportunity to deliver a clear message to U.S. officials and municipal counterparts in both countries. But what was their response? What did the mayor hear from American and Mexican leaders? And what impact could this growing tension have on communities like Sturgeon County here in Alberta? Now, we caught up with her worship to discuss her key takeaways from the trip and what comes next, as today is Liberation Day in the United States. Across Canada, our cities, towns, villages, and rural communities are alive with stories waiting to be told. Stories of innovation and economic development, resilience in the face of the housing challenges, and the financial hurdles municipalities overcome every day. At the Cross Border Network, we bring these stories to life. From coast to coast to coast, we're connecting Canadians to the issues shaping our communities and showcasing the people working tirelessly to make them thrive. With your support, we can expand our reach, amplify more voices, and shine a light on the challenges and triumphs of municipal life. For as little as $3.99 a month, you can help us grow and continue sharing the stories that matter most. Join us today and be part of this important mission. Together, we can tell more stories, build stronger communities, and make a real difference. Support the Cross Border Network now. Visit www.crossborderinterviews.ca today. Mayor, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about your most recent travels as part of the FCM delegation to Washington, D.C. We are recording this a day before quote-unquote Liberation Day, where Donald Trump is going to be imposing tariffs from across Canada goods and the resource sector here in Canada as well. Why was it important for you, the mayor of Sturgeon County, to be part of this delegation to hear from American and Mexican counterparts?
Well, it was an incredible opportunity to be asked and to have an opportunity to talk about, from an Alberta perspective, what tariffs mean. We had representation from across the country. There was 9 mayors from Ontario, Saskatchewan, myself from Alberta, British Columbia, 2 from Ontario, 1 from Quebec, New Brunswick, and then, of course, President Rebecca Bly of FCM. There were 6 mayors from the U.S. We had Columbus, Ohio, Columbus, South Carolina, Lansing, Michigan, New Orleans, Louisiana, Rochester Hills, Michigan, San Antonio, Texas, and then 11 mayors from across Mexico. So it was really just important for us to get together and talk about what tariffs mean at a community level. I mean, I've got papers all around me of numbers and figures, but in the end, just to have a real understanding about what it means to our businesses and our residents, our job creators, and even as municipalities, there are going to be effects on our ability to manage our fleets and manage our assets, because we have such an incredible connective tissue across the continent on so many levels that when you try to break that connective tissue, there's some real damage at all levels. And so hearing consistently from all the mayors at the table, there will be no winners from these tariffs. And most of our communities are just now starting to rebound from the economic downturn caused by the global pandemic. And so really just brittle systems still in place, and still a fresh perspective on how brittle our food and our trade systems were, and just seeing this as another assault and wondering what, if ever, would it take to recover if these tariffs do come in effect, how long they last, when's the tipping point when communities wouldn't be able to bounce back from the effects of this. Because as the one mayor from Mexico shared, if you're concerned about the illegal drug traffic, then the very best thing to do to battle against that is to create a healthy economy that has access to good legal jobs. And when you see the effects that will happen from tariffs, you're going to remove the ability for people to enter into the legal workforce and be part of a prosperous community. So this really is going to only exacerbate the existing issues for Mexico anyway, from that perspective. And we've seen, $1 billion or over $1 billion put towards border security here, drones, Black Hawk helicopters, canine divisions, more boots on the ground. We're doing what we can in that perspective, but in the end, it comes down to the economy. That's what makes this continent tick. And food security and national security, I think, are tied quite closely together. And the healthy economy is kind of the framework that is a really important part of that. And we all see this very much as being at risk and having a very detrimental effects for our residents.
I'm just going to play a little devil's advocate with you for a second, because the man who is about to impose these, if he hasn't by the time people are watching this, is sitting in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Why was it important to speak with your mayoral counterparts from Columbus, from Louisiana, from Mexico? Because an outsider, from someone in Sturgeon County or someone across Alberta or Saskatchewan who may be watching this, might go, why was a mayor down there not speaking with a congressman or a senator and sitting with a mayor? Because the mayor won't have anything to do with if the tariffs are going to come on or come off on April 2nd.
So we wanted to make sure that we had that we first shared the perspectives and the impacts in our community, and that we understood that we were not isolated, that we weren't alone in our concerns about those effects, and that we could share real life stories and facts and information as to the effect in our communities. And then that's kind of the call to action, is for each of us to go back to our communities and share that to the higher orders of government, and then request those higher orders of government and those individuals, whether they be congressmen or senators or members of parliament, to really understand that this is, what the effects of this are. You can get caught up in, I guess, maybe in the federal politics of it and the posturing and the strategy behind it. But we are there as the government closest to the people to remind them that strategy has real blood and bones behind it when it fails. And those are the people that we're representing. And also for the circles of influence that we're in, or the boards or committees or associations that we sit on or communicate with, to ask them to pass resolutions, formalize your position, speak out, add pressure to the people who are in the decision-making sphere on these, because this is all information. We are a part of that feeder system up into those higher orders of government. Individual residents can write letters, and yes, that matters. But when you have coalitions of mayors across the continent representing 3 different countries, I think that adds potency and import to the message that we're sharing. And that's why we were speaking amongst ourselves as peers, and then our U.S. counterparts will speak to their higher orders, and we'll do the same here, and our peers in Mexico will do the same there.
while Canada municipally don't have partisan politics, and I say that knowing that we're about to have them here in Alberta for a bit, there are some municipalities down in the States who do have partisan stripes. You run as a Democratic mayor, you run as a Republican mayor. Were the conversations that you had with your US counterparts different by the party that you were speaking to, or did you get a sense that both Republican mayors and Democratic mayors understood that tariffs are just not good for any community, no matter how you vote? They're just not good.
Yeah, and there was a split, three Republicans, three Democrats, and they were all singing from the same song sheet. This is a no-win situation for their municipalities, just because of how tightly we are all tied together from a trade perspective. So for them, it doesn't matter what stripe they were from. It was the effect on their economies, driving up the price of food. If you're going to stop importing Mexican and Canadian beef, how are you going to replace that? I mean, we in 2024 exported 1 billion pounds of beef into the US market. Mexico exported 600 million pounds of beef. And obviously, the US sent beef across the border both directions as well. So you remove that from your food chain. What effect does that have on those processing factories that are already, some of them running in the red and under threat of closure from Tyson and Cargill? So these are rural jobs that are at risk if those processing plants become untenable. And even from the perspective of oats, we have Canadian Oats here is a Mexican-owned company that's been milling oats in Sturgeon County for almost 20 years. 80% of their product is exported into the wholesale market in the US and used for manufacturing of foods there. So when you start removing that amount, I mean, we supply over half of the food grade oats that are manufactured into finished foods in the US. So you start pulling out our protein and our oats, that is going to drive up the cost of food for Americans. If you remove the Canadian lumber and you start adding steel tariffs, you're going to drive up the cost of a house by 5%. So for the average American, that means they're going to spend another 21,000 US on their house, another 5 to 10 cents a gallon for their gas, $2,000 or $3,000 for a vehicle. Some of the gentlemen from Mexico were sharing, if their average salary is $40,000 for a resident, how are they going to be able to ever afford to absorb that increase to a cost of housing? And the one thing that was clear amongst all of the mayors there is the housing crisis in their communities. We just can't build affordable houses fast enough. So these additional strains are going to have real effects to everybody, but especially the marginalized folks who are just trying to get into affordable shelters.
Now, you said you have lots of numbers in front of you, so I want to play the numbers game with you for a few seconds, Mayor, if you don't mind. Um, we don't know how long this is going to last, and I'm not trying to put a positive spin on it, but it could be an hour, it could be a week, could be 6 months, could be the entire 4 years. What's the viability of Sturgeon County in the short term and long term? How much of an impact are you going to see? Have you started having conversations with your administration to potentially see how this war, and I'm going to call it that, is going to impact Sturgeon County on April 3rd, 2025 and April 3rd, 2026 if it goes that long?
We are starting to reconsider some of our incentive programs that we use to attract business. We have been expecting, fairly consistent growth in the heartland. Another $40 billion. Was certainly something that was achievable in the next 10, 20 years. But with the uncertainty and investment that is created around this trade war, that certainly puts a chill on foreign direct investment. When 97, 99% of our oil and gas are exported to the States, If you're going to add 25%, that's going to dry up those markets. So you're going to have challenges around your offtake agreements, which will, people then have to start powering down their production, their refining. And we know when oil and gas are affected, the success of those businesses is affected, the economy is affected, then the property values are affected. As the property values go down, the assessment goes down. And then as you apply that mill rate over that lower assessment, then your budget goes down, which means, your operating budget is affected. So then that's cuts in services, never mind just not spending money on shiny capital things. It just means the day-to-day services that you provide have to be rolled back. So those are absolutely concerns. I mean, here's just a number: $115 billion is the total trade in Canada's chemistry and plastics products with the U.S. And so, 70% of U.S. imports from Canada are used to manufacture goods in the U.S. So they're going into their pantry and they're removing all the basic ingredients that they need. Because as much as we like to think we're adding value to our products, we're still pretty much exporting some almost raw commodities, or certainly just doing the very minimum of industrial chemical manufacturing before we're passing along our ethylene glycols and anhydrous ammonias and polyethylenes and polypropylenes down to the States for them to make into other things. So, this will have a real effect on the growth. I mean, and I think we've seen that even in projections from a Canadian perspective. We'll still see some growth in Alberta. It won't be the growth that we were anticipating, but we'll see some growth. We'll also see growth in unemployment rates, getting closer to the 8%. But I think for other provinces in Canada that weren't seeing the growth that the Alberta Advantage was offering, it's going to have some really serious effects.
We are, as I said, this is going to be airing on Liberation Day. And so that means tariffs are coming. And by all accounts, from what Donald Trump said on April 1st, they're going to come soon and they're going to come quick. Literally, they're going to be announced and they're going to be in place. Was the mission down to the Washington, D.C. successful if these tariffs still come into play on April 2nd?
Yes, because as it was Chatham House rules, so I won't quote the mayor, although I'd love to give him credit for it because I thought it was quite profound. But he said the most important infrastructure that we can build right now are bridges between people. And I concur. And I've seen that even in Penwar, Pacific Northwest Economic Region. I attended in Whistler last year. As you know, Councillor Como has been to Washington twice already with Federation of Canadian Municipalities, meeting with the North American counties, and then myself recently with the Conference of Mayors. It is these relationships that we have to keep connected and keep communicating to try to find ways to support one another, because this will not be forever. And I think us sharing strategies and what has worked and what hasn't will maybe help us find our way through with the least amount of damage as possible. And I think it's also important for us to remember that the politics is getting quite divisive. But I didn't get any sense of division when I was talking to people down there at all. In fact, quite the opposite. So I think we have to always remember that the people come before politics. And so I think continuing to build those relationships. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities is having its annual convention in Ottawa this year, so in the nation's capital. And so the invitation was extended to the mayors at the table from both the U.S. and Mexico, hoping that they might be able to send a contingent to Ottawa just to continue these conversations. And I got the sense that there would be other opportunities for members of FCM to stay connected and keep meeting, because it will just be very important to continue to share developments in real time and honest developments that you know are happening in communities that are verifiable, that aren't just talking points or misinformation that can be questioned. I think having solid first person data shared across trusted connections through these relationships will be very important in the years coming forward. We are just so entwined, and even around the F-35s, and whether we switch to filling the rest of the order from the Saab Gripen, who knows? But one thing I've learned, even in just listening to some of those conversations and reading articles, is how intertwined our military is. And I know that even just from many of the base commanders here that move on, their next posting is often an American military base. We just work that closely together. So yes, it's a very awkward time, but these relationships are not going to go away overnight. We need to fight to keep them in place more now than ever before.
Ask a very political question, so I do apologize. But I recently chatted with the president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities and Yarmouth Mayor Pam Mood for the show when she went down as part of another contingent down to Washington, D.C. And she told me that she heard some jokes around Canada becoming the 51st state from some of her American counterparts that she was speaking to. It was a joke. She did not react, and she said it on the record. Gotta sort of pull the band-aid off here, Mayor. Did you hear
Yeah.
those type of comments? And if you did, was it positive? Was it negative? Was it, we don't know where this is coming from? What did you hear around Canada becoming that 51st state that we do not
I
want to
didn't
be?
hear any jokes whatsoever about it. But again, Chatham House rules. I was grateful that one of the mayors, as we were wrapping up the roundtable, mayor said, I don't want to derail the conversation, but just have to say the 51st state comments and conversations are insulting. They're unwelcome. We're not interested, and they've got to stop. And that was, appreciated Mayor taking time to point that out. And the message back from the American mayors were, absolutely respect our sovereignty, respect the good neighbor that we've been, respect that we've not just been neutral, we have been a staunch supporter and had America's back. And I even, felt that on my afternoon or evening bicycle tour of the Washington monuments, riding past the Korean War monument, we were a part of that. World War II monument, we were a big part of all that. We were in some of those forays before they were. Blood's been spilt. So my experience was that they have a huge respect and appreciation for our sovereignty, our nation, and the role we play. And they certainly don't have, they weren't window shopping, let's just put it that way.
While the conversation has been dominated by Donald Trump and the ongoing tariff war potentially between the United States and Canada and the United States and almost every other country right now, there's one tariff that has been put into place that I'm assuming could impact Sturgeon County. And if it hasn't already, it probably will. And that's the tariff from China on canola. And I know Sturgeon County is a very big agricultural community as well. You have many farmers. You are one of these hybrid communities of urban and rural parts. Has that impacted Sturgeon County at all in the early days of the China tariffs on 100% of canola?
Yeah, I mean, out of the 500,000 acres we have here, a large portion of that is in canola. I guess if there's any blessing, it's that the tariffs aren't on all canola. It's been separated out as to whether it's processed or raw. But when you see your commodity prices fluctuating and heading in the downward area, and you've been sitting on your product waiting to fill quotas, that definitely has an effect. And farmers plan their seed programs and their contracts long in advance. You just can't switch on a dime when you're running a 4-year crop rotation. So yeah, this is going to have some serious effects. And even for us, having preliminary conversations around our budget this year and our tax increase. We've seen the province of Alberta, give income tax break that they promised, but at the same time meeting the very, very important needs of a stressed education system, and that coming on to property taxes. We're looking at 11% property tax increase just from the education tax alone. So we had what we thought was going to be a 1.6 or so. We're gonna do everything we can on our part to keep it to a 0, and maybe slow the roll on some of our capital projects, because we do know that people are going to be working under thinner margins than before. Absolutely. I think the effect of the other tariffs, so based on U.S. aid canceling some of the work. I mean, there are American farmers who already might not have an opportunity to even sell at a loss. I think they've already, sold stuff that maybe haven't been paid for, or have it sitting, and suddenly their buyer's gone. So it's going to be a challenge for farmers across North America, but certainly this tariff that was done to support Americans is certainly biting us. And I know there's some issues around the death penalty that was executed some dual citizens, Canadian, Chinese citizens, that might be causing the government, some delay in removing those tariffs. But ultimately, I think we have to become more nimble and responsive to day-to-day changes. And I think doing what we can to repair our relationship with China, because there's a new world order these days, and we need to respond to it much faster than we have to limit the collateral damage that we're facing here.
I'm just cautious of time, and I have one last question for you, because you mentioned it during the interview, but I want to just ask a very simple question. Yourself, and you also said Councillor Neil Como, have both been in Washington, D.C. over the last few months. Sturgeon County seems to be putting themselves on the map in Washington, D.C. What's the ROI for Sturgeon County to have the mayor, the councillor in Washington, D.C. advocating? Because I can imagine there's many other mayors or councillors who would jump at the opportunity to put themselves on the map. For Sturgeon County, what was the return on investment for the residents of Sturgeon County for these trade missions?
Well, we've got oat producers and we've got beef producers, and we are home to Canada's largest hydrocarbon processing cluster in the heartland. And those are all areas that are important, not just to Sturgeon County, but to all of Alberta and all of Canada. They contribute massively to the GDP. Yeah. And so for us, and I was the only rural mayor at that table. So for me to go to speak to the effect that it has on farmers, on the producers of the food that create those ingredients that other people need to process, I think was really important. So I think the ROI for Sturgeon County was for the rural voice to not be lost at that table. We are an important part of the economy, and I was able to speak to that, with just some of the numbers I've shared to you, some of the information, and build some of those relationships. It was, not really many other ways that I would have an opportunity to meet the mayor of San Antonio or the mayor of New Orleans. They're lovely people. I hope to be able to see them again. And as you know, Councillor Como is a networking aficionado. And I'm looking forward to attending Penwar in Bellevue, Washington this summer. And I'm going to be reaching out to these mayors and encouraging those in that Cascadia region to consider going to Penwar if they haven't, to continue these conversations. So those are return on investment, is for us to be able to say, we're here, we matter, these things affect us, we expect better, and what can we do to ride this out?
Mayor, I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for sitting down and chatting with me. I feel like this is an important conversation that needs to be ongoing, particularly on the timeline that we're in. So much appreciated for taking time to do this.
Thank you very much for your interest, Chris, and for you running across the country, keeping the municipal voice at the forefront, which I have to say is is in a critical place with the loss of local news. And the amount of misinformation and garbage, unfortunately, that is unfettered on social media. You're playing a really important role, standing in the gap of where local news reporters have not been able to maintain. So thanks for your interest, and thanks for keeping the real information at the forefront for our communities.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. To learn more about the communities and the people we feature on this show and our sister shows, be sure to hit us up at crossborderinterviews.ca. There you'll learn all about the great communities and community leaders from across Canada. Now, if you can, your support means the world to us. Share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community. It helps keeps the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back later on this week with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs. Till then, everyone.